I welcome everyone to our third installment of the Q2 component of the Field Manager Development Program. Thanks again for your continued participation and engagement. For today's topic, we're going to focus on performance management and feedback. And David Sakamoto, VP of Customer Success, is going to kick us off today. David?
All right, excellent. Thank you, David. And thanks everybody for joining. This is a really important number of sessions, and appreciate Dave and you and the team to get in, and Josh to get this set up, because there's nothing more important than developing our teams. If we stack rank everything we do, this is the number one thing that we do in terms of how do you successfully achieve the goals of your team in GitLab, but also how do you successfully achieve the goals of your individual members and what they're looking to accomplish in terms of growth in their career. And I oftentimes, when I talk to people about management, I refer back to my very first manager when I was fresh out of industrial engineering with my engineering degree, going my first job. And my manager said something that left an impact on me, that I try to do my best to perform the same kind of things with my teams. But he said, my role is to get you to where you want to be. And whether it's on my team, whether it's in our department, whether it's even in the company, whether it's in another company, somewhere else, my goal is to get you to where you want to go. And that was really meaningful to me, in the sense that it established that trust, and he actually operationalized it in terms of forcing me to have career conversations in our one-on-ones. And I really appreciated that, and it's something that I tried to role model as well. But for today's session, it's really going to be really important about talking about performance management to unlock the talent and creativity and passions of your team and the individual team members, and really focusing on that performance management aspect of providing that direct, clear feedback, doing it early and often. And there'll be a number of different kind of sessions and ways for you to participate. But what's really important is that you participate and share your examples and your stories of experiences, because that's what's going to make it more rich and certainly more fun. So, like I say, last thing is, let's use this opportunity. We all wrote, so like I look at these as this is a great opportunity for us to connect with maybe some team members that you wouldn't normally connect with. So let's take advantage of that opportunity. Share each other so we can all learn from each other's experiences, and let's have some fun. So I think back to you, David, or Amy.
Awesome, David. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. All right, great. Set the tone for today. As we get started, before going into the meat of the agenda, hopefully everybody saw the communication about the Field Manager Summit. So this is going to be essentially an extension of Contribute, and it's happening on Saturday, September 18th. So the Saturday before Contribute. As you see listed there, it's just for people managers in the field organization. And I can't emphasize enough, this is entirely optional. It is entirely okay if you opt out of Contribute, if you opt out of the Field Manager Summit. This will not impact you negatively in any way. For anybody that's not able to attend in person, again, completely okay. We're going to have an exciting virtual learning experience where we will replicate many of the same experiences in a virtual setting, likely several weeks after the in-person event at Contribute. And then I've included a link within the slides there to frequently asked questions. So if you haven't had to take a look at that, please look at that when you get a chance. Right, next slide, please, Josh. So for today's session, David said it really well, right? We're going to talk about the importance of providing feedback and what some of those best practices are, and looking at how providing feedback, positive and constructive, in a specific, objective way is going to help to amplify and motivate your team and amplify the performance of your team. All right, next slide. So I feel like we should have some special music for these field manager spotlights. So da-da-da. All right, Jennifer, thank you so much. I wanted to call on you to share your feedback your experience of how you approach providing feedback, and some examples that you can share with the rest of the team.
David, I would be okay if you wanted to throw down some rap for me.
Nice. I can't do it. Can't do it on the
on
fly.
the spot. Let's just flow. Come on.
Give me some beatbox.
Good morning. I'm super excited to be here. I wanted to share a little bit of things I learned and was reiterated in the training. And just some good validation to know if I'm on track or if there's places I needed to expand and grow myself as a leader. And then share some of the things that I do with my team on a day-to-day, on a weekly, monthly coaching. So my talk track is around providing feedback, direct, objective, and specific. So first and foremost, I want to build trust and rapport with the team. So when it does come time to do feedback, it's not awkward, it's not intimidating, it's not tense. And so how do I build that rapport and trust? I think of myself as a coach, of an advocate for them. I love the example that Sakamoto gave, that his boss was there to help him get to the next level in his career. So how do I do it? I connect, I guide, I develop, I connect, I guide, and I develop their skills, help them develop their own skills. What does that look like? Connecting is really building the relationship. It's the foundation. Guide, help them with sales calls, with prep, with planning, with forecasting, looking at where their gap to goals are. And then developing their skills, sit in on the calls, listen, ask for an opportunity to give direct feedback. We debrief on almost every session. Connecting, it needs to be authentic. I'll give an example of authentic connection with my team. I have a Sal that's on paternity leave, and I called him and he picked up and he said, "Oh, do you need to do a forecast?" And I was like, "No, I just need to know, are you okay?" He's home with a lot of babies and his wife's back to work, and are you okay? And then we did the forecast, of course, because I just was curious if he's working, where are we at? One of my top performance sales, when she overachieved her number for the year before the year was over, I sent her flowers. GitLab has a program for that. I wanted to celebrate her. We also did, everyone on the team logged into a Zoom and we did a dance party for her because we weren't going to be able to get together to do something. So celebrating in public, I think we all know that, but it's super important to be reminded. I do a public celebration every win that they have, whether it's a good meeting, a development with a channel partner, or a win, a PO comes in. We have my manager Slack channel and the whole extended team's on there. And then they high five and they thumbs up and they put the emojis of the dancing penguin. Another one, Susanna had her dog die, so we sent flowers to her for that. So we find areas to show up for each other. So the communication ebbs and flows at all times. It's not just what happened to the deal. It slipped from commit. What, like, I have now this authentic opportunity, not just to connect on a personal level, but to coach and guide them, right? So it's kind of a soft point of entry. I also encourage my team to cross collaborate with the extended team and with other teams. So then they're learning from each other and they're getting constant feedback from each other. How can they grow? How can they expand? Other places of celebrating in public, other than the Slack channel and our dance parties, QBRs, we do meetups. There have been some in public recently where we get to really celebrate and connect. I do feedback early and often, early before things go sideways, and often. These aren't just about sales drills. These are, one of my sales was really struggling on his QBR, because if you've been on the QBR and 75 people and half of them you've never met, he got nervous and his voice was quivering. So we did some nervous tension release. How can he prep better to be a better public speaker? It's not necessarily an easy call to call and say, hey, you're challenged on your ability to project on a call and feel super confident. Like, that was a welcome, and I did ask, can I give you some feedback? I've had some observations. I'd like to help you. One of my sales said she wasn't super motivated to work out. Yeah, so that's an issue. We need to have our physiology charged, be in a peak performance. I mean, a lot of this training is on peak performance. If we're lethargic and we feel like crap, do you think that's going to transcend through a really powerful sales pitch or doing an outbound call campaign? So talked about what she could do to set her physiology to be a peak performer, to start her workouts again. She's working out now. I'm super excited about that. I also encourage the team with books to read. with podcasts to listen to. So they're indirectly getting coaching from me, but from other mentors. So physiology, physical, mental, emotional, their state is also part of my coaching. I want them to be in peak state so they can crush it when they're showing up for their prospects, for their team, so they can be a highly influential, high energy driven leader themselves. When the feedback is constructive or difficult, I open it up with a dialogue. Hey, would love to give you some feedback. Do you have some time? I also give them permission that if they're not in a good place that day, or they just had a rough morning, or the kid, we were on a call and Susanna during her QBRs had her daughter potty training. And if I wanted to give her feedback that maybe she wasn't in the mood to hear, because she'd say, I just wasn't in peak state that moment, they have permission to be like, not today. Just wasn't my day. I wasn't thriving. So I would like to postpone feedback, or maybe just not to receive it today. I personally want to do that for myself too. We know when we're at our best. So an example on when I had to give some not awesome feedback to one of my sals. He had a deal that was committed. It was in Q4. We weren't getting a response from the customer of when the PO was coming. I started to get the intuition of, oh no, this maybe isn't coming. So I reached out to the prime who was doing the project with us, escalated the conversation to a leader, and invited that person to the call with the customer. So in the government, we have a government customer and also a systems integrator. System integrator leader punted the call to somebody lower level, but still she had given the direction. The compelling event was ultimate for security challenges. They needed CI/CD with security to move forward because they had concerns of what the version that they were using of GitLab. So I was told and was fully committed to helping drive this deal to closure. I learned on the call with the salon that the customer was underutilizing the amount of licenses they had and had no intention to move to Ultimate. We get off the call and I asked my rep to debrief and said, here's my talk track to that call. How do you think that went? And he shared. I said, what do you think we could have done differently? We arrived at a state that wasn't going to close a deal. It wasn't going to be in commit. It didn't just shift from that quarter. It shifted out. It still hasn't come in, honestly, and this was committed in December. So we went to shift and redirect. What could we do now? Next question. What did we learn? What could we do? What could he have done differently? And I'm putting ownership on him. I didn't misrepresent the commit. I didn't lose the timing and the tracking of the deal or the budget or the funding. So what could you do? How do you think it went? What could you have done differently? What do you think you need to do now? That would be maybe the deal's dead, go find a net new deal, or go back to the customer and find a new date. Maybe we just shift the time frame. And then what insights have you gained? None of it's terrible. All of it's very introspective and gives him the opportunity to course correct or learn from areas of growth. And then would be, what do you need from me? Maybe he needed a hug. I don't know. It was a pretty challenging situation. That deal we needed collectively from him to close to make his number, from him to close to make my number. So we missed our number, and I'm not going to put that ownership on him. But if we had known data early enough, we potentially could have backfilled that deal. So we've recovered, and that communication was open. It was not hostile. I don't have concerns about hurting feelings. I'm here to coach and guide and develop, right? So if there's permission to give the feedback, this is the kind of the structure too, and the tone. Where could we do? What could we do differently? What can we learn? So at the end of the day, accountability, they're accountable for the goals they set. And just because the topic is also peak performance and accountability to performance, we set quarterly goals based on the annual quota, and we break those down into monthly. That's about how do you create your pipeline? How are you driving your revenue? When are you meeting with the channel? When are you meeting with your inside sales team? And then each week we go backwards from here's your commit, here's your gap. What do you need to, how do you need to pivot and shift? We're constantly playing hot potato. Go, 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 go. Evaluate, pivot, shift. Backfill. So peak performance. It's a strong philosophy. I believe in it. I live by it. And I coach and guide my team to level up to that too. So I don't know if we have time for questions, or David, if that's a part of the structure, but I'm happy to either answer questions here, or if anyone wants to reach out on Slack, if I can help anybody, that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. I took lots of key takeaways there, and yeah, I would love to open it up for any comments or questions that folks have. But a few notes I took: the being authentic, your authentic self, and how you deliver that feedback. Everybody's going to do it a little bit differently. Feedback from each other, right? It's not just you giving feedback, but cultivating an environment where folks can lift up and provide feedback to each other, celebrating in public. And I love also that you said, yeah, sometimes it's about pipeline, it's about sales, but it's not just about that. It's really looking at the whole person. Asking for permission is now a good time to have this conversation. And then really that asking questions to help facilitate that buy-in, so that the person that you're providing feedback to really takes ownership of what those next steps are and how they can improve, et cetera. And then asking authentically, how can you help? So yeah, love all that. So for the team, any additional comments or questions that you want to ask Jennifer? I see, Helen, you've added a comment there in the chat. You want to verbalize that?
Yeah, I think one of my biggest takeaways from what you just said, Jennifer, which was awesome, by the way, is that all of your feedback and coaching has got to be done with the person in mind, because if they don't think that you care about them, they'll never take constructive feedback as constructive. They'll take it as an attack. So I loved everything that you were saying, Jennifer. Totally agree.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, everyone. I think everyone's just astounded by the awesome insights, Jennifer.
The awesomeness.
So, there we go.
Thank you. Yeah, anyone can reach out to me on Slack if you want a one-on-one. I'm happy to support anyone.
Thank you. So Josh shared with me that there's a handbook page that highlights what are the biggest risks for GitLab. And number 4 on here, I didn't know this. There's a link where you can find more, but number 4 is not providing feedback and performance management of our people. So today's session, right, is really about, let's mitigate for that within the field organization. Let's make sure we're best in class at providing feedback and performance management. So with that, I'm super excited to have a guest speaker today. Amy Tisdale is the team member relations specialist for GitLab, and she's going to share her insights and perspective and best practices for a number of topics related to force management. So Amy, thank you so much for joining today, and I'll pass it over to you.
Hi, everyone. I know I look a little different than my picture these days, but so I'm going to give you a little background about myself. And please feel free to interrupt and ask questions. I worked for Sodexo previously. If you don't know who they are, they're a global company that does food and facilities management. I was responsible for North America, the East, so New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and I handled 350 different union accounts. So all the CBAs that go with that. So I have a lot of experience, and all I did was employee relations. They had 150,000 employees in North America. So I know people, and so there isn't anything that I haven't seen. So if you feel like there's something unique, it's probably not unique to me, unfortunately. So one of the things I'm going to talk about, so what I'm here to help the organization with is team member relations. So it's not just if a team member has an issue, they can come to me, but it's also managers. So when you're having concerns with a team member, it's really important. I think the first thing I'm going to say is, when in doubt, reach out. We can talk it over, figure it out. If it's not a big deal, I'll say, hey, listen, let's just do coaching with this person, but have it very set, So I call some conversations the water cooler conversations. So they're like, you know, if you're in an office space, you're walking past somebody, you go, hey, listen, had an issue with something you did last week. You need to correct that. The person's like, yeah, okay. If you have those conversations, they don't think it's a real constructive conversation, right? So they're like, you're like, yeah, I had this conversation with the person, but in their mind, they're like, no, it was just it was a water cooler conversation. So we do get to a point, and just so you know, I was a manager for a long time. So I've made the mistakes of rewarding my good workers with more work because I didn't want to address the issues that I was having on my team, which demotivated my team members. So my good team members became mediocre team members because why should they work harder when I'm not addressing the issues that I have on my team? So I have been there. So I think some of the issues or some of the things that I've seen at GitLab, we have a lot of changing managers for the teams. So the teams see a lot of management change. And I think it's really important to set your goals for your team and be consistent with all team members. There's always going to be somebody that you want to go have a beer with, right? You like their personality, but you have to be consistent with everyone. So you have to work really hard with that person that meets the expectations, but you may not connect on that personal level as much as somebody else. You just want to be careful too. You'll have some team members that will tell you everything that's going on in their lives. An example is I had a team member, she had a child in the hospital, didn't want anybody knowing. We were going to write her up for attendance. And I said, what's going on? And she said, I don't want the managers knowing my son's in the hospital. So there's going to be some people that tell you everything that goes on in their life, every wart that they ever get, but you're going to have a team member that is not going to share those instances with you. So you have to be, that's why it's so important to be consistent. So there isn't that variable in there. Never give critical feedback on somebody's emotions. Give it on their work, on their behavior, and the impact that their behavior is having on a team. So it's not just meeting the numbers, it's about getting along with your other team members as well. So if you have somebody out in the fields that is caustic and nasty to other team members, you're going to have a problem because they're not going to work collaboratively with each other. So that's really important to make sure that you're focusing on the behavior and how they're impacting the team. So I think the thing that I have seen in the past is that people, even though somebody's promoted, you got to be careful when you're promoted from a sales position, an individual contributor to a manager, because you have to be careful of how you're perceived. So you also, again, have to be consistent with the message. It's a tough thing to do. So identifying performance problems, and I'm sorry, I'm getting a little off track. If your team members are missing the critical deadlines, it's important that you address those quickly. Don't put them off. The team members, if you don't tell them what's going on, they're not going to be able to correct their behavior. But those are some of the things I deal with, different issues that people may have issues feeling that there's some bias based on different things that are going along with the team. Just so you know, I can't always be transparent. So I've had people ask me to be transparent and I can't be all the time. So does anybody have any questions? I don't want to take up too much time from your day.
I have a question.
Sure.
for like, people support, we've been like different groups have a different point of contact, when we have personal issues in the people ops team. Are you saying that we can come to you in addition, or we should go to our initial contact and then escalate to you? Just want to be clear on that.
No, it's actually going to me now. So anything that has to do with team member issues or concerns, we're taking that off of the business partners so they can be more strategic. I'm used to doing this stuff, all day, every day type of thing. And so I can be the heavy, right? So you want a strategic partner for all those other things. I can be the person that you come to. So you come directly to me. They will be involved. I will let them know what's going on so they can elevate those to the VPs.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, also Dave Astor, Solution Architect Manager with GitLab. Just validating what Amy said. I had the opportunity of asking Amy some questions early on. When Lorna was still here, she pointed me to Amy for a issue I needed to discuss something on the team. So Amy was great. So validation, please use her for assistance and help. So
thank you, David.
Sure.
Amy, what are some of the, obviously without getting the specifics, what are some of the most common things that you see from managers that, at GitLab that bring you, things to talk about?
Yeah, I think what I'm seeing a lot of people are very nice around here, which is great. But sometimes you can't always put what everyone's doing. Everyone has some good points, right? So performance isn't always, not everything is bad. But when you're addressing that concern, that's not the time to bring up, oh, you're doing this really well, but you're not doing this, because they don't hear the critical feedback that they need. So, I mean, that's fine for one-on-ones, but when you get to the point that the person, is not meeting expectations, they're not meeting their numbers, it's so important. And if somebody needs me there with them to help give that feedback, I'm more than willing to help out. Because that person needs to know. It's not, I have let people go that were unaware that they had issues, but I was told that they were aware that they had issues and they were really surprised. And that's not a very comfortable feeling for me when I'm on a call with somebody and they're being terminated or, exited out. I forget the verbiage that GitLab uses because I'm used to terminated. So, but exited out of the company and they're unaware that they were doing anything wrong. And there should have been some feedback given along the way. I'm trying to think of some of the other, I think some of the other things that I've seen is people are really good technically at their job, but they're not very good with their team members. So I have a lot of people that come to me that say, I will not work with this person anymore. But they're very good at their job technically, but their personality and how they treat others is not the best. So it creates walls. And so they're not a top performer, even though they're getting all their boxes checked in other ways. So.
Amy, I'm also curious, just how the performance improvement plan fits into the picture, from your perspective, and how you've seen it used at GitLab.
So we have changed it a little bit. There's no more PEPs. I didn't really understand that coming from my world. So now how it works is if you are going to put somebody on a PIP is a performance improvement plan. Basically, that performance improvement plan is for somebody that needs a little help to meet expectations. They might need some skills building, need some coaching and mentoring by the manager. But if their willingness is not there, if they're taking so much time off, if they're not meeting numbers because oh, well, they took 2 weeks off in a matter of a month, and that's why they're not meeting their numbers, then that's not a reason for a PIP. That would be a written warning. You're not meeting your expectations because, you don't have this in the pipeline. You're taking too much time off. Yes, it's like unlimited PTO, but you have to be reasonable, performance first, right? So that's where I see that. I think that when you're having that critical conversation with a person, you need to let them know, hey, listen, we're having problems here. This is where you're not meeting expectations. The next step is a written warning or putting you on a PIP. That way, that person knows what's coming down the pipeline for them, or the pike for them. They know that, okay, if I don't get it together, this is what's going to happen. So.
One of the areas of emphasis for this series and today's session is learning from each other. So I'm going to invite folks to be vulnerable, right? Maybe share some hard knocks lessons that you've learned in real life, right? As you've developed as a manager. Now, I'm not going to ask that without first being vulnerable myself. One of the mistakes I've made too many times, but that I continue to focus on is not having those tough conversations early enough. And in my head, it's like, well, maybe this other thing was the reason. So I'm going to cut this person a little bit of slack. And, oh, yeah, but this have this going on in their life, or all these other competing priorities, and continue to just not have that conversation. But I was given some advice years ago by a manager that said, ask me the tough question of, do you think you're helping that person by not having that conversation? And that was an eye opener for me, right? We are doing a disservice if we're not having that conversation early, because I think some of you mentioned in that social learning issue, people inherently want that feedback. People inherently want to be better. People inherently want constructive criticism of how they can improve. So have the conversation early and seek it with, Jennifer gave some good advice, right? Of seeking to understand, hey, here's the situation. I'm going to pull in some SBI here too. Hey, here's the situation. This is the behavior I observed. This is the impact I see it having, but what's your take? Do you see it the same way, or tell me more about your perspective? And that way, they can share if there are other extenuating circumstances that perhaps, we don't know about. But if you have the conversation early, right, you're at least identifying that and not putting it off too late. So with that, I'd love for anybody else to be vulnerable, share a lesson that you've learned through your management experience about feedback and performance management.
We got Chris and David with their hands up there.
All right, David, you want to go first?
Okay, I'll go first. Well, I'll go because mine's very much aligned to yours, David. And it's my personal experience when I didn't give feedback in time, and you wait some time, then it becomes the interesting thing is then the conversation becomes really hard when you're giving feedback about something that was 2 weeks ago or a month ago, and the person, you're now going to surprise them potentially. You're now actually you've missed the moment where it's still fresh in mind, where they can reflect and course correct and improve. And you've literally lost the value of kind of providing that feedback. And I've just found it's just much simpler, right? If you give feedback in the moment, it's expected. It's just part of a natural conversation. It just makes it's way more effective. And it just, frankly, I think it makes it easier on both parties to both give and receive the feedback. So I've known I remember one of the specific drivers when I don't do it, and I realize when you mentally walk through the conversation how hard it is, and I realized, wow, that was a missed opportunity and a mistake. So the counter experience if you don't give it in a timely fashion.
Great points. Thank you, David. And Michelle, thank you for commenting in Zoom chat. Will you articulate that, please, and say more about your comment there?
Sure. I mean, making sure that the feedback is timely, with and when it happened in the moment, but also in private, right? Not doing it if it's in a team setting or in a group call. All of our words have weight, and doing it publicly can be more impactful in bad ways.
Great point. Thank you. So Chris Weber, I'll call on you. I thought of several like bear puns that I could use, but I'm going to spare everybody. I won't go there. So I'll let everybody use their creativity for some fun bear puns that you could have used to introduce Chris.
All right, thank you. So a couple things, right? So when I look at being a leader and what we do, right? It's a lot of it comes down to consistency, transparency, and accountability, right? So we're consistently having one-on-ones and feedback sessions, that we should be with our reps, right, every week or multiple times a week, or whatever. And so when we're having those discussions, right, we put out what our expectations are pretty early on, what pretty much from day one. This is what I expect, as far as interaction with customers and building pipeline and closing things. And so when we're having these consistent meetings, it's beholden to us to give that feedback and saying, hey, you had a kind of a light week, or maybe the last couple of weeks your pipeline gen has been off, and things have just been not really firing on all 8 cylinders here. What's going on? Like, help me understand what's going on. Do you need a little bit more training, and do you need more resources? How can I help you bring you back up to that level, versus just watching you flounder and then hope things are going to turn around on your own? And so having these consistent and these consistent feedback sessions, I think, helps bring people along and realize, hey, I got an advocate here, and I'm not just held out here on an island hoping that I can succeed. And then if things fall apart, oh my God, what do I do? Right. So being active and coming and bringing to them, like, hey, you're falling behind, or there's some deficiencies here. What can we do to help right the ship before it spirals out of control and you get buried too deep in a hole, or 10 weeks into a quarter and you have no way to figure out how to get across the finish line? It's better than saying, oh, you're deficient. We got to fix it, or we got to move to a plan. I think in my kind of way that I run things.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Yeah, consistency, always on, right? Yeah, it's so that it can be relevant, timely, specific. Love that. Jonathan, got your hand raised.
Sure do. I was just going to share that there have been times in my leadership or management career where you get so focused on where people need to improve, and if you have a large team and you're serving those people, you're coaching them, that you can sometimes then forget that there are top performers that you're taking for granted, people who are just like, you don't have to worry about them much. They're doing what they're supposed to do, and they're doing it really well. But it's also really important to remember that you need to provide those individuals recognition and positive reinforcement and feedback for the work they're doing, because sometimes if you go a long period without doing so, those top performers who are so critical to your team end up feeling not appreciated, and that is just as bad, that in fact I would say worse, if you end up having an attrition risk with a top performer than if you're struggling to bring a low performer and you're putting all your focus on a low performer, get sort of remediating those situations. So it's always has to be that balance.
Yeah, great points, because I think you're right. Performance management has a negative connotation to many, but it shouldn't. It doesn't. Right? It's also the positive feedback, and kind of connecting it to some of what we talked about during the last session, as we think about that Drexler-Sibbitt model, right, of organizational health, going from 4 to 5 to 6, and really that peak performance, right, is about celebrating those successes and that positive reinforcement. That's awesome. Sherrod, I'm calling you next, please.
Yeah, I think mine's kind of maybe in part a statement and also some learning too. But this past season, I think in leadership during COVID has been probably the most challenging that I've ever seen as a manager and as a leader, just because there's so much else going on. So I think when you've got team who are struggling, it's been really hard. And the only way that I've really seen any success through it, and I'm sure that we did plenty we could have done better, was just to keep talking to the team about all the things that are going on outside of just their performance to better understand. We've had team who've had family who have passed and a lot of really challenging situations. And I think that knowing there just hasn't been a beaten path in the same way in having kind of a formula for how to work with people in the same way there has been in other seasons. So this past season for me has just really been about communicating often, spending more time ensuring that we're asking questions of them, of individuals, and trying to find platforms to find out how each other are doing. And then using that to augment how we think about developing teams, just because this has been new for me this past year.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. And Chris Moore, I love your feedback there. Yeah, empathy, right? More so than ever needed to demonstrate and lead with empathy in the last 12 months. Matthew, on to you.
Yeah, thanks, David. Yeah, so I've just got a short one that I just want to throw in from my hat in the ring here. So, General, as a leader, you always like to think you've got a bag full of answers. Part of the kudos of being a leader, but sometimes often that expectation can get in the way of engaging where performance and feedback is required in the right kind of time. So basically, putting aside that expectation that sometimes I put on myself in terms of I've got to have all the answers. I've realized that actually talking through things together can be a much more important exercise than immediately kind of jumping in and saying, look, I can see what the solution is, or here's an answer, have you tried this? So really it's making sure that I put that aside and then just really focus on the individual and then work together that way out.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. And while we're with EMEA team, let's go over to Helen.
Hello. I was going to add to what you were saying earlier, David. One thing that I learned the hard way is separating the employee from the person. So yeah, people have things going on in their personal life that can impact them, but knowing the difference between what they are still able to do and what they're not able to do, I think is really key. And you've always got to have that managerial distance, right? If you get too close, I think it really clouds your judgment, and that's something I definitely learned the hard way early on in my career.
Thank you, Helen, for sharing that. Yep, agreed. And I see David Sakamoto chimed in too. Yeah. So here's David. Do you want to reinforce that of I know you commented on some of Matthew's comments, so I think that would be super helpful to hear from you.
I think that was Dave. As much as I love Dave Sakamoto, that was I'd love to be him, but that was me actually that put it in. So
all of us Davids get confused with each other, David. Exactly.
I think there's a channel of other people. We should have a David channel, right? No, just reinforcing what Matthew said. Yeah, I mean, if they just came to me and I was, oh, here's the answer, that would just never allow them to grow and research and learn for themselves. And I mean, I know I don't have all the answers, but I mean, yeah, and even if I did, I would want them to, or I want team members to go to, teach a person to fish, as opposed to just giving them the fish. So yeah, so thank you, Matthew, for bringing that up.
Thank you, Annie.
Yeah, just going back to building trust, I think sometimes it's as simple as having an honest conversation. If somebody's not performing at the level that's expected, just ask them, are you happy? Are you happy in this job? That happened with me, and came to find out that the person didn't like carrying a quota and didn't like pressure. And in sales, those are the only two things that are guaranteed to increase and to be constants, is that you're probably going to have a quota increase and you're going to have more pressure. And it resulted with the person moving into a marketing role at another company, and then checking in later and finding out that they were so much happier, because we spend so much time in our occupation and in our career that to do something that you're just not happy doing, and to just ask that simple question, is this for you? Is this the right role for you? Beside what individual, what different things you may not be attaining against, are you happy doing what we're asking of you? And it seemed like it was a huge burden relieved off of their shoulders to just say, you know what, this really isn't my gig. This isn't for me. And I think it was a great career change for that person, and made them much happier in the long term. Sorry, that's my bulldog snoring in the background.
That's love that example. That's great, and I see that a consistent theme of the part of our responsibility as managers is cultivate the growth and development that may or may not be in the role that they're currently in, right? And so really thinking about the whole person, and it's not just about, you know, responsibilities in the current role, but hey, what makes them happy? What makes them tick? Where do they want to get to in the future? So thank you, Annie. Jim.
Thanks, Summers. I had two things. One was building off of what Helen, I think the phrase she used, separating the person from the employee. And I would characterize also separating the person from the performance, such that the coaching is taken not as a personal attack on that person, but around the performance that exists. Jack Welch, I remember a story that Jeffrey Emmelt, who took over as chairman of GE from Jack Welch, said that Jack had given him feedback. Jeff, I love you as a person, but if you don't get the plastics division profitable, I'm going to find someone who can. So being able to have those tough conversations, but focus on the performance, not the person. Second example I would give is that coaching can go both ways. So a person who's actually on JKS's team today, back when I was leading that person, I had given her what I thought was some praise and a real pat on the back. And the following day, she came back and gave me some feedback that the way I had presented the information actually had a little bit of a negative impact on her. And that was great that we had the level of trust that she was willing to give me that feedback. So I challenge all of us, are we also seeking coaching from our people so it's seen as bidirectional?
Yeah, I love that, Jim. And that builds upon what we've talked about, right, the past couple of sessions, is that had you not established and cultivated an environment of trust, that conversation may have never happened, which meant they may not have felt safe sharing that with you, which may have meant you didn't develop and get a learning, you know, from that. So that's great. Thank you. Tim.
Yeah, I heard a story one time about a dad who was watching his son in a karate lesson, and there were 20 kids. They were all doing the same exact motion, and he was watching his son, and he was super embarrassed because his son was had everything wrong going on in this very simple motion. And the karate instructor was walking around the room, and he would just slowly adjust his son's foot. And the dad's like, why are you changing his foot? Like, everything about my kid is wrong right now. But a few minutes later, he would come back over and adjust the son's shoulder, and slowly and iteratively things began to improve. And by the end of it, his son was perfectly, doing this motion. And I was thinking about that in light of what Chris was saying, of that early and kind of that frequent time spent with your team is so important, because if you have that time, you can just slowly adjust things, so that way you don't have to kind of deal with the bigger ramifications when a lot of things are going wrong. So just kind of, it's been helpful for me to slowly focus on, all right, what things can we iteratively improve upon, and celebrate those wins as well.
That's a great story, Tim. Thank you. Thank you to everybody that has been vulnerable and taken a moment to share your insights and your experiences. Hope everybody got some nuggets from that. I certainly did. Wanted to go back to Amy. So as we look at anything else come to mind that you wanted to speak to or highlight as it relates to your topics of performance management and some of the things that you heard the last 10, 15 minutes or so?
Yeah, unfortunately, Amy had to drop for another call, so she left, but I really enjoyed the session. Everyone should know how to find her now. So if you have questions.
Yes, so Amy, if you watch this again, thank you. Really appreciate your taking the time.
Yeah, thanks, Amy.
Any other thoughts or questions? Anybody else have anything you wanted to share? All right. Hey, Josh, what do you think about, we'll do our break now, break for 10 minutes, and we'll come back at the top of the hour. Does that work?
Sounds great. It's perfect.
All right. Thanks. We'll see everyone at 12 Eastern. Thanks.
See you soon.
You know, if the manager is bringing a lot of the accomplishments and achievements to those one-on-ones and highlighting, you know, Josh, you did great at this, you did great at this, but maybe those aren't the things that you're proud of, and you are actually rewarding yourself for a different accomplishment or a different achievement that's motivating you, and you're not aligned on those motivations, then that individual could continue to come back and say, oh yeah, that, you know, that was great, but I wasn't that proud of it, and they're downplaying it because you're not highlighting what's important to them. So asking your direct reports, you know, what motivates you? What are you proud of that you did last week? What was an accomplishment that you were working towards that you hit or didn't hit? And then using the SBI, we actually thought about focusing on the behavior of their downplaying. So the situation is your results are great, you're a top performer. But what I'm noticing is you're kind of downplaying your achievements, and the impact of that is you don't seem to be progressing in your career. So what does career progression look like for you? What are you aiming for? What do you want? They might not want to go to that next level. And so then we also talked about their personal lives. Are there different priorities that the timing might not be right today? And can we be a really good mentor and coach and manager to them and help them see that they can still be successful and can still grow and invest in their career while having to prioritize other things? Or do we find that appropriate time for them? So I don't know if others want to chime in from the group, but that's what we talked about.
Super valid points. I love that you brought up the imposter syndrome, you know, because I think that's something that, you know, not a lot of groups have brought up after reviewing this scenario. And I think that's a really valid point to discuss with the report. I also like too that you talked about how, you know, not everybody wants to get promoted at GitLab. You know, maybe they're okay with staying at the same level and continue to go for the ride. What about another group? Anyone else?
I'll go. We were group 3. And we took scenario 3 because we thought it was probably the most challenging, where there has been an undercurrent of maybe challenge with a team member that you haven't addressed. And so I think one of the pieces that we kind of talked about was just really radical candor about ensuring that you're framing everything with kindness and through relationship. And that's really put forward. But at the same time, too, also having an open conversation around, are the objectives clear? Are we clear on kind of what we're trying to solve together for, and having that conversation rather than it just coming kind of raining down with feedback. I think also too, not because you've never actually openly addressed it before, not coming in with too many previous examples. So it doesn't just feel like you've got this big suitcase full of things that you now have that you're going to present to this person, but instead looking more at where we are today, aligning on what we're trying to solve for, maybe some of where, in our opinion, where the challenges are, and then together agreeing on like a mutual kind of plan forward.
Great point. I like, I'm curious, like the use of, you know, radical candor, has that been successful in trying that? Have anybody actually applied that framework here into giving feedback?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I think is really quite good actually. And there's a really good little video. I mean, Josh, you can probably help me who to put that person's by, but it kind of talks through what radical candor actually is, because it's a funny term, but actually what it comes down to is it just giving you a really nice little framework to actually get to where you need to be. So no, that's something I learned doing the management challenge thing in January. So it was something that really did resound with a good technique that I hadn't really seen. And yeah, I do think about it in terms of the way of, you know, combining that, you know, caring personally with challenging directly in that kind of, you know, top right quadrant there. And it's quite interesting to see, you know, ruinous empathy and manipulative insincerity out there on the left-hand side. And I think I've got examples from my past about where I've seen that actually happen in certain situations.
Wow. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Matthew. Curious if you have more applications, definitely share them with us.
One thing for Radical Candor that can be really helpful, in addition, obviously, for helping you deliver, I usually have teams either read the book or watch it's like a 10-minute TED Talk. It's really quick to set expectations that feedback is going to happen. And there's lots of different ways to give it, and there's lots of different ways to receive it. And so it's not something that anybody would ever be caught off guard by. And that it also sets the stage that it's a good thing to receive, I think, because that's the hardest thing for folks is receiving feedback in general in any facet of your life. So it helps them understand that this is being done to help benefit them. So just kind of setting the groundwork for an entire team can be really useful with Radical Candor.
Yeah, maybe set the groundwork before you give Radical Candor is a good approach. Great. Well, I know we've got about 6 minutes left, and wanted to bring things to a close here. It's been an awesome 3 sessions with you all. I know we've covered a ton. There was a lot of work to do asynchronously as well, and pre-work, and there was just a lot of work that you had to do on your own, as well as dedicating time to these 2-hour sessions throughout the last 2 weeks. So I think as you're looking ahead and throughout your careers, definitely reach out to David and I and our teams, learning development and field enablement, to engage on some of this material as a follow-up, and just thinking about how you can apply that culture of feedback throughout your teams. I know that was only one topic we covered throughout this training, but I think we really want to make sure, as GitLab continues to grow and scale, feedback, that culture of feedback is really top of mind, and we don't lose that as we get bigger. We've got a lot of big plans in the future. So David, anything else before I transition over to the survey?
Thanks everybody for active participation, but I wanted to quickly take a moment just to say thank you, Josh. Really appreciate your partnership, like with corporate L&D. And for folks that don't know, so Josh and his wife are expecting. And so Josh is very soon going to go on paternity leave. So we're excited for you, Josh. And again, just thanks so much for being an awesome partner here.
Yeah, thanks, David. Appreciate that. If I don't check my emails during the months that I'm taking off, I'm probably not going to. That's all I can say.
Good. Don't.
Awesome. I appreciate that. It's been great partnering with you as well. Cool. Well, like I said, I would love it if you could take some time to fill out this evaluation. I'll post a link in the chat as well. GitLab is really invested in you as people leaders, whether you're a manager, a senior manager, VP, or director, senior director. This is top of mind for leadership. When I interviewed with Sid, my first question to him is, what is your top priority for L&D? And he said, it's manager enablement. And, this is really a key priority. So we're always trying to make this better. We want to learn from you. Give us really honest and open feedback. Reach out if you have any questions, and we'll continue to iterate on this.
Thank you all. And we will, after this session, based on your feedback, with the field manager advisors, we're going to take a look at how we structure the session in Q3, which again will be interactive, lots of role plays, but please share your feedback, because we're going to use that to help inform what are the areas that we focus on for Q3, et cetera. So there'll be more information to come about the Field Manager Summit, whether you participate live in the Bahamas with us, or if you participate in the virtual follow-up if you're not able to join. So thanks so much.